The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, and by the fourth night, it felt like the sky itself was unraveling, pouring out everything it had been holding back for years. The kind of rain that makes people rush home faster, avoid eye contact, and shut their doors a little tighter. But for her, there was nowhere to rush to. No door waiting. No warmth inside. She stood under a flickering streetlight, soaked to the bone, clutching a thin folder against her chest as if it were the only thing tethering her to this world. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from the weight of a decision that had to be made before sunrise. Tomorrow, by law and by family, she needed a husband. Not someday. Not soon. Tomorrow. And that was when he saw her. A single father, exhausted from a double shift, holding a small hand in one of his and a grocery bag in the other. He almost walked past her, like everyone else had. Almost. But something about the way she stood there, completely still, like she had already given up, made him stop. And in a moment that would change both their lives forever, he said something no stranger should ever say to another. "If you need a husband by tomorrow, then you'll live at my place. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that even broken lives can find their way back to light, take a second to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. You never know who might need this story today." Her name was Areeba, and everything about her life had been decided by others long before she ever got a say. Born into a family that valued appearances over happiness, obedience over dreams, she had learned early on that survival sometimes meant silence. Her father's word was law, her mother's fear was constant, and love was something she had only read about in old novels hidden beneath her mattress. But even in a life controlled by others, small rebellions find a way to grow. For Areeba, that rebellion came in the form of education. She studied in secret, applied for scholarships without permission, and slowly built a quiet escape plan. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was patient. Careful. Hopeful. Until everything collapsed. The proposal came suddenly, a man twice her age, wealthy, influential, and known for his temper. The kind of man families whispered about but never refused. Her father didn't hesitate. For him, it was security, status, and a burden lifted. For her, it was the end. She tried to say no. She really did. But in her world, no wasn't a word daughters were allowed to use. So she ran. Not far. Not boldly. Just far enough to breathe. Far enough to think. But time wasn't on her side. Her family gave her an ultimatum: return and marry, or be cut off completely. No home. No support. No identity. And then came the final blow. If she wasn't married by the next day, her father would legally bind her into that engagement without her consent. She had one night to rewrite her fate. On the other side of the city, Hamza had long stopped believing life would ever surprise him again. His world was small, predictable, and heavy. It revolved around his 6-year-old daughter, Noor, the only light that had survived the darkness of his past. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving behind silence that never quite faded and responsibilities that never paused. He had learned how to cook, clean, braid hair badly, and read bedtime stories with voices that always made Noor giggle. He had learned how to be both parents at once, even when it broke him. What he hadn't learned was how to stop feeling alone. That night, he wasn't looking for anything. Just milk, bread, and maybe a few hours of sleep. But life doesn't ask for permission before it changes. When he saw Areeba standing there, something inside him shifted. It wasn't attraction. Not curiosity. Something deeper. Something human. Desperation recognizes desperation. He didn't know her story. He didn't need to. The fear in her eyes told him enough. When he made that offer, it wasn't calculated. It wasn't even logical. It was instinct. And for a moment, she just stared at him like he had spoken a language she didn't understand. Then something broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like a thread snapping after being stretched too far. She nodded. The apartment was small, modest, and filled with signs of a life held together by effort. Toys scattered in corners, a half-finished drawing taped to the wall, a faint smell of cooked rice lingering in the air. It wasn't much. But to Areeba, it felt like the safest place in the world. Noor peeked from behind a door, her curious eyes studying the stranger with innocent suspicion. Hamza introduced them gently, explaining nothing, forcing nothing. And for the first time in days, Areeba felt something unfamiliar. Calm. The night was long, filled with explanations, silence, and the kind of conversations that don't follow any structure. She told him everything, not in perfect order, not with perfect words, but with honesty that came from exhaustion. He listened. Not as a savior. Not as a hero. Just as someone who understood what it meant to feel trapped. When she finished, the room fell into a heavy silence. Then he said something that would redefine everything. "We'll get married tomorrow." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even fully understood. But it was real. And sometimes, real is enough. The next day felt like a blur, documents, signatures, witnesses who didn't ask questions, and a reality that felt too strange to process. They became husband and wife without ever knowing each other. A contract born from necessity. A decision made under pressure. A future built on uncertainty. The challenges came quickly. Society doesn't accept unusual stories easily. Neighbors whispered. Relatives questioned. Doubts crept in from every direction. But the hardest part wasn't the outside world. It was the inside. Learning to share space with a stranger. Learning boundaries. Learning trust. Areeba struggled with guilt, feeling like she had stepped into a life that wasn't hers. Hamza struggled with responsibility, wondering if he had made a decision that would hurt more than help. And Noor just wanted to know if Areeba would stay. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into quiet routines. Something subtle began to change. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was respect. Areeba began helping around the house, not because she had to, but because she wanted to belong. She cooked meals that slowly replaced the rushed dinners Hamza used to make. She fixed Noor's hair in ways that made the little girl beam with pride. And Hamza noticed. He noticed the way she checked doors twice before sleeping. The way she hesitated before laughing, like she wasn't used to it. The way she treated Noor, not as an obligation, but as something precious. Trust doesn't arrive all at once. It grows quietly. In small moments. Shared glances. Unspoken understanding. One night, during another heavy rain, Noor fell asleep between them while watching an old cartoon. The lights flickered, the world outside felt distant, and for the first time, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Areeba looked around the room, the same room that once felt temporary, and realized something that both terrified and comforted her. She didn't want to leave. But life doesn't let peace last without testing it. Her past came back. Not gently. Not quietly. Her father found her. The confrontation was intense, filled with anger, accusations, and threats. He refused to accept her marriage, calling it invalid, shameful, unacceptable. But this time, Areeba didn't stay silent. She stood her ground. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she finally had something worth protecting. A life. A home. A chance. Hamza stood beside her. Not in front. Not behind. Beside. And that made all the difference. The battle wasn't easy, but it was fought with truth, legality, and something stronger than fear. Choice. And in the end, her father walked away, not satisfied, not convinced, but defeated by something he had never expected. His daughter's courage. After that, things changed again. Not dramatically, but deeply. The walls between them slowly disappeared. The marriage that began as an arrangement started becoming something real. Something chosen. If this story is touching your heart even a little, take a moment right now to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Your support keeps stories like this alive, and someone out there might need this reminder that hope is real. And before we reach the end, I want you to do something special. Drop a comment saying, "Kindness changes lives," if you believe one small act can rewrite someone's entire story. Years later, the rain came again. But this time, it felt different. Warm. Familiar. Almost comforting. Areeba stood by the window, watching droplets race down the glass, while Noor, now older, brighter, laughed in the background. Hamza walked up beside her, not as a stranger anymore, not even as just a husband, but as home. They didn't need to say anything. Some stories don't need words to prove they're real. Some beginnings don't look like love, but they become it. Slowly. Gently. Unbreakably. Because sometimes, the most unexpected offers lead to the most beautiful lives.